Hi folks, so this short video is on signal detection theory, and before we get started I'm going to have you copy this down verbatim in your notes. And so go ahead and pause here, copy this down, and come back when you're ready. I'm assuming you're ready now. So signal detection theory is an interesting example of how researchers focused on errors to help explain why things happen. And in psychology, so far in this course, you've learned that behavior is very variable. And what researchers in psychology are interested in doing is looking for patterns and finding out what the norms are for different behaviors. And we also are interested in the variability. But the main part of psychology looks at the norms. Well, in psychophysics, which of course is studying the psychological experience of physical phenomena, so psychophysics, there was a lot of variability in what people reported as whether or not they actually detected signals. So that impacted the researchers' interpretation of what the thresholds were, what the absolute thresholds were, what the different thresholds were, etc. And so at some point, folks started looking at errors to see if there were patterns in the errors. And so signal detection theory suggests that when people report perceiving something, so when they report that they can detect the signal above the noise, so that's that signal to noise ratio, so that they can detect that signal, that was a combination of not just the quality of their sense organs, their eyes, their ears, tongue, and so forth. It included a personality factor, so a willingness to report that they detected it. So I'm going to hold this up, but I'm assuming you're looking at your notes. So if we look at this, if you're a researcher and you're testing for somebody's threshold, you're going to present a stimulus sometimes, and then you're going to present no stimulus at other times. And then you're going to have the varying levels of the stimulus. So you've got the stimulus is either present or it's absent. And that's something that you can determine objectively. So then when you present that stimulus or the lack of stimulus to the subject either says, yes, I detect it, or no, I don't. So what you get is a combination of what the subject does and what the state of the stimulus is. So when a stimulus is present and the person says, yes, I hear it, we call that a correct answer, and then we call it a hit. If the stimulus is absent and the person says, yes, I detect it, that's actually an error. It's an error, and we call that a false alarm. On the other hand, if the stimulus is present and the person says, no, I didn't hear that, I didn't see that, that's an error, and we call that a miss. So they missed it. And if the stimulus is not present, it's absent, and the person says, nope, it wasn't there, that's a correct answer, and we call it a correct rejection. So what researchers did was started to analyze the errors to see if there was a pattern. And what they found was that some people tended to say yes a lot. And so they were more or less equally accurate in their detection, but they tended to say yes a lot, which meant that they picked up a lot of hits. And when they made errors, they tended to make false alarms. And so if people tend to say yes more than they tend to say no, we call that a response bias. And that particular response bias is called being a yay-sayer. And so if you're a yay-sayer, you're the kind of person who somebody calls up and says, you want to go to the movies? And you've got a test. And you're like, yep, I'll go. Do you want to try this new funky food? Yep, I'll do it. Do you want to jump out of a plane with me? Yep, let me go. Just let me do it. On the other hand, if you... so the researchers found that other people had a tendency to say no more often than they said yes. And in that case, they would have been correct quite a bit in rejecting, so saying that no, that there was nothing there, and in fact there was nothing there. So they would have been high in this category for correctness, but their errors would have been misses. And so that's also a response bias, because they have a tendency to say no more than yes. And that response bias is called being a naysayer. And so these folks, if you call them up and say, do you want to go to the movies? And like, I don't know, I should stay home and study for this test. Do you want to jump out of an airplane? Do you know how many people die doing that? And so forth. So again, the signal detection theory says that we're trying to find out what people's absolute thresholds are, what their different thresholds are, but we're depending a lot on self-report for perception sorts of things. And when we take self-report as a measure, we have to acknowledge that what we're measuring is a combination of a person's sense organs, the quality of their sense organs, and their willingness to say that they've heard or seen or detected that signal. So in the bigger picture, at least in my course, I talk a bit about the problems that people studying psychophysics face in figuring out sort of truth with a capital T. And this is one of them, that people's personality plays a role in whether or not they report something. So, okay, I'm going to stop there, and I will see you on the flip side. Okay, bye.